Okay, if we can get the door closed, we'll get started, please. And thank you for coming. I know it's a small amount of time to leave the chambers and get in here, but everybody's got multiple committees today, and we want to be respectful of that. At this time, we're going to ask Representative Steve Tarbin to fill open us. Amen. Thank you, Representative Tarbin. All right, we have before us today House Bill 952 by substitute, and at this time we'll recognize Governor's Floor Leader, Representative Nimmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and those in attendance. I appreciate the opportunity to come back before this committee again with a substitute to House Bill 952. Just as a refresher, this was a bill that was started off as a conversation out of the federal court opinion on the dental board case in North Carolina. That spurred the interest of our Attorney General and our Secretary of State's office, and ultimately our governor in the executive branch. Those three communicated and came up with an original plan that I presented before this committee several days ago, and from there we've made several amendments and adjustments, and I am of the impression and am very clear that we do not have it 100% palatable for everyone. However, I am also of the impression and 100% clear that we are a body that has to make decisions based on good governance and the best interest of the people of Georgia. Mr. Chairman, I think with that in mind, we've moved to a measure today that is something very palatable and understandable for this body and for this committee to understand. And I think we've addressed a lot of the concerns that the body had. We moved the appointee in the original bill. It was stated as the governor or his or her designee shall be the one that appeals and decisions would go to and come from for the active supervision that you'll see in line 23, excuse me. It says that the state will provide active supervision of the conduct of the boards. Originally, we had said that active supervision would come from the governor or his or her designee. We've moved that to the Secretary of State would be that person appointed by the governor. There was a lot of conversations that needed to be the Attorney General or someone out of his or her office. And what I have learned, and you'll remember my remarks, I'm not a lawyer in the last committee hearing, but what I've learned is you can't be counsel and judge, and I do understand that on a very dirt road in layman's terms. And so what we have, in my understanding and conversations about this measure, I understood, and everybody way above my pay grade and with a lot more intellectual abilities than I did understood that the Attorney General needed to stay engaged in this measure. So to leave them as counsel to the licensing board, the Attorney General will stay engaged with all meetings and rules and recommendations by those boards. The Secretary of State will then, and through one of the changes that was requested by some interested in this bill, putting in a time frame, and you'll notice that on line 66 on page 3, we said that the Secretary of State in this version of the bill will make a response within 90 days through recommendation from the Attorney General, who is either sitting in or via teleconference on all board meetings. Mr. Chairman, there was a lot of concern in the last meeting about whether or not we needed boards in Georgia. I want to state again that this is not the subject matter that deals with that. I understand that people have a concern and a conviction about the red tape dispenser around some of our businesses and the ability to expand and function, but this has nothing to do with that measure. I can appreciate and respect people's opinions and thoughts and directions on that. This puts us in compliance with a federal rule that was passed down in Georgia, trying to make a step through the leadership of our Attorney General, Secretary of State, and the governor of this state, and ultimately, Mr. Chairman, you and your body right here, to try to get us in a position where we have a safety net in the event that we have a an appeal against a board, against any decision or rulemaking they may have enforced. Mr. Chairman, I'll be glad to take any questions. I don't anticipate there are any, but I'll be glad to entertain any comment or question if someone may have just dreamed one up.
All right. Do any of the committee members have a question?
Wonderful.
Representative Henson.
I can hear you, Representative Henson.
You can?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to speak up.
So,
Where exactly is it saying that it is coming in under a Secretary of State as opposed to the governor? Okay. And then my other question is, I'm confused about the language, lines 49 and 50. It seems almost redundant. 49 and 50, they almost seem redundant.
In what way, ma'am? I'm sorry. Review and in writing approve or veto any rule before it is filed in the office of the Secretary of State?
Yeah, if such rule is required to be filed in the office of Secretary of State, aren't all rules that affect the board filed with coming out of the boards that are under the Secretary of State?
Representative Henson, I may have to let one of my attorney friends come up here and speak to the specificity of your question there, but my understanding it's all rules. Yes, ma'am.
And then what are you doing about the boards that aren't under the Secretary of State?
They're listed in here as well.
Mr. Nimmer, let's ask your attorney to join you just for information and corrective statements.
I think, Mr. Chairman, if I may, while Mr. Teague's making his way out here, Ms. Henson, Representative Henson, I think you'll see that in line 39, any boards that currently aren't under Title 43 or Chapter 43, you'll see them in Title 26 right here on line 39 on page 2.
But what about the other boards that aren't under the Secretary of State? They're not the only board not under the Secretary of State, are they?
I think that's all. That is all of them, yes, ma'am. That wraps your arm around all of them.
Some are not under the Secretary of State, but they are covered by the terms of this legislation.
26.
Any occupational licensing board.
We have one other. Representative Harden.
Yeah, Representative Nimmer,
Yes, sir.
I was listening to your presentation, and you mentioned the Attorney General. What line was that on?
The Attorney General's sitting in already. That's nothing that we are seeking to codify. That's
so you
already
weren't saying
happened.
that was in the bill?
No, sir. The Attorney General's in there now. Yeah.
All right. And, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment at the proper time.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Harden. Any other members have questions? Chairman Knight.
Sure that was working. Just to the author, I know we're in a particularly bad situation with this Supreme Court ruling. So inaction is not necessarily, it's not on the table. I think that this body is going to be forced to do something, or we're going to be in a bad situation that we don't want to be. However, I'm going to agree that there's some things in, and I appreciate what the author has said. This is probably not the final version that we're going to see. There's a lot of input going on. We're going to make sure we're going to do the best job we possibly can do to make sure we limit this, that we keep our boards intact. And I know there's an amendment too, but I'd like to work with authors as this thing goes through and make sure that we come up with something that is, I think, palatable to everyone concerned, especially in light of the Supreme Court case that we now must deal with this.
Yes, sir, Chairman Knight. And Chairman Epps, if I may respond to Chairman Knight's question. I think this will be a work in progress, as many things are that we do up here. And not only are we in a situation that we get the opportunity to govern. You know, there's get-tos and got-tos in life, and saying that we're forced to do it is in lieu of just the climate of our country right now, but we get the opportunity to govern and help make sure that we do the right thing. And so, you know, I kind of embraced this challenge. I knew it wouldn't be an easy one, but this is one that this body and its wisdom will be able to work through all the way to day 40, as you know how this system works. And I've pledged out to Chairman Harden that I know he's got some things that he's not quite able to swallow yet, but we also know that we're in a precarious situation. And it's out of every one of our control in this room right here, but we have the responsibility, and we took an oath to govern in the right way and in the best direction possible. And I think 952 in the substitute form that it's currently in puts us in a posture to be able to do that with a yay vote today.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Representative Peake.
Got me? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The floor leader, I just want to make sure we really and I missed the first part, so excuse me if I'm being redundant, and I look forward to supporting your bill, because quite frankly, if we don't do this, we're going to be that precarious situation of all of a sudden we're going to start losing board members off of these licensing boards. Because I know for one, if I was appointed to a board, which many of us may be one day when we leave here, appointed to a board and had no immunity, I wouldn't be serving.
Yeah.
And so there's a very real chance that that boards may not even be able to function, because board members may be leaving us so quickly once they realize they don't have immunity. Is that not true?
Yes, sir. I appreciate you pointing out the obvious, but yes, sir, that is very true.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Harden.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, first of all, Representative Peake, I would point out, though, that immunity is there as long as the board member does as the Attorney General who sits in on the board meeting recommends. So there has been immunity for board members. This is a case, I think, where we may see a board act beyond the advice of the Attorney General, and then they would not have the immunity. But I would, if it's proper time, I'd like to make
Now's the time, Representative.
like to make two amendments. The first one would be on page 3, line 65. Insert the following line before the B, of course, number 5. Provided, however, any remand, modification, reversal, or veto of a proposed rule or action by a professional licensing board shall be predicated solely on the proposed rule or action being in reasonable potential violation either of antitrust law or in violation of North Carolina State Board of Dental Examiners versus FTC. 135S.CT.1101, parentheses 2015.
All right. Representative Peake, you have a question? You have a comment? Recognized for that.
I'd be interested in maybe getting the governor's learned counsel to address the amendments. I know you said you had two, but just the implication of that, if that's proper, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and it certainly is.
Okay.
Counsel.
Okay, this is just to respond quickly to the question, if you allow, the question you'd asked Representative Peake about whether or not, if you follow the advice of the Attorney General, whether that prevents you from having immunity. Well, the reason in the case, that's not accurate. The Supreme Court made it clear, very clear, that you have to have active supervision by a sovereign, which is the board sits here and has governance over the entire state of whatever licensing issue they're covering. The Supreme Court says you got to have active supervision by the sovereign. A separate elected official who's answerable to the people has to have some kind of a control mechanism over that board. So that's where the liability is coming in, is the fact that Georgia does not have any active supervision right now under the way that Supreme Court case reads over any of our licensing boards.
Saying is that this bill would provide that supervision, which would provide the immunity, but if we don't act.
It would.
That we would have board members with significant, with no immunity for serving on that board.
And to this amendment, it's my legal opinion that if you added this amendment in, it would nullify the impact of this legislation to remove that existing antitrust problem that we have for each board, if you added that language in.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Counsel. All right, we have a motion. I have a motion for an amendment. Do we have a second? Have a motion and a second. Chairman Shaw, you.
So what you're saying is, the question to me is like whether or not the Attorney General's office representative there that's basically of counsel for the board, that's not considered supervision.
No.
Okay.
And we have a member of the Attorney General's office here who can speak to that as well, if you would like to have
No,
further
I
input.
mean, that's the way I would interpret that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, we've had a motion and a second for an amendment. We're going to ask for a vote on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Maybe see a hand vote, please. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hands. All opposed? Amendment carries. All right. This time we'll entertain a motion on the bill as amended.
Mr. Chairman, I move do pass.
Have a do pass and a
We're
second.
not taking this one up.
All in favor of the motion to do pass? Pardon? Sure.
I just want to make sure that the amendment we made, does that address, does that still leave the question mark out there of what we've just been trying to address, that we have not provided the supervisory capacity?
Mr. Chairman, if I may respond to that, because I'm gonna give a non-lawyer answer to this thing because I think sometimes that's what we need to do. You'll see some shaking their head no and some shaking their head yes, and it's a difference of opinion. It's a man's right to vote and a lady's right to vote. That's why we need to not leave any doubt and no question out there to Representative Peake's point about whether or not we're putting the right safety net in place. If the amendment offered that just passed comes into this bill, it is the author of the bill's belief that we leave a question mark out there and that we don't do what we are intending to do. Now, I note that I say that we're carrying this into further discussion. You get multiple legal opinions and you're going to have multiple different opinions. I think we need to take the gray area out of it.
All right.
Continue that.
Okay.
I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but would it be proper, and would there be a proper motion to have a reconsideration vote on the amendment?
All right.
I move that we have a recommendation.
We have a motion for reconsideration and a second. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
No.
Well, sounds like the ayes have it, so we will now have a motion. We will have reconsideration for the amendment. Not a committee member. Okay, again, all those in favor of the amendment as stated, raise your hand in favor. Aye. Okay, you don't count with me. Okay. All opposed by the same sign. on the reconsideration, the amendment failed. We now need a motion on the bill without the amendment. Have a do pass and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed, no. All right. Can we get a hand signal on the ayes? And a hand signal on the noes. All right. We thank you for coming. The meeting is now adjourned.
All right, let me know what you come up with.